The purpose of this lesson is to teach you how to download and install Microsoft Visual Studio 2012 Express, which we will be needing for the remainder of this course. What you will notice in Blackboard is that you have two links. One is for the Visual Studio Express, and then one is for the update. You will need to download and install both of these. Now, these are actual direct links to the site on Microsoft to actually download it. So I'm going to go ahead and open both of these in a new tab. Alright, so for the Visual Studio Express 2012, you can click the download button. And when you click download, it will take you to a page where it asks if you want the full version. Notice it's an executable. This is a web downloader. You actually want to use the second one. So I'm going to put a check mark here. Click Next. And that's the one that's 607 megabytes in size. It will go back to the main page. It'll tell you that a pop-up did not appear. So I'm going to go ahead and click here where it says if you download did not start, I click here. And then now I actually have a direct download link. So if I click here, then I can go ahead and save this. So I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Now I've actually already downloaded it, so I'm just going to cancel this, but on yours, go ahead and download that entire thing. It is 607 megabytes in size. It will take a while to download. After you download that one, you will also need to download Visual Studio 2012 Update 4. And this one is like a service pack. I don't want to do download here because if I do this, it only gets some of the files that I actually will need. So I'm going to expand Install Instructions. And then if you scroll down, you will see a link here that says you can download the ISO image directly. Go ahead and click on this link. And then we're going to do the same thing. Just save this. I'll save it to my desktop. And once again, I already have it downloaded. All right, so after I download them, I'm using Windows 7. So I have two options. One is I can burn both of these to a DVD and then do the installation from a DVD. Or the other option is that I can download and install 7-zip, which would allow me to extract the files. And then once I have them extracted, then I can actually do the installation. If you are using Windows, do a Google search for this, if you're using Windows 8 or above, then you can actually double click on the ISO image. And what that will do for you is it will mount it and it will pretend that you inserted the disk in the drive. And you can actually use that. So I'm just simply downloading the one for 32-bit because that's what I have installed. All right, once it's done downloading, then I can go ahead and install it. And this is 7-zip that I'm installing right now. This is a program that will allow you to zip and extract zip files, RAR files, gzip, a whole bunch of other formats that are available, but it will also allow me to take these ISO images and I'm dragging it with the right mouse button over to some blank area in the desktop. And when I let go, you'll see that I now have a 7-zip menu. And then I can do extract to, and then the name of this folder is going to be the name of the file. So what it's doing is it's just simply taking all the stuff from the ISO image, extracting it, and pretending that I actually inserted the disk in the drive and am copying the files from it. I'm going to do the same thing for the Visual Studio installer and for the update installer. So I'm going to right drag this one, so I'm dragging it with the right mouse button, 7-zip, and then extract to VS2012.4. This file here is 2.3 gigabytes in size, so total these are almost 3 gigabytes. Expect a while for it to actually download the files. But once you get them downloaded, use 7-zip to extract them, or like I said, if it's Windows 8 or Windows 10, you can just simply double click on the ISO image and that will actually mount it and let you access the files directly. Just waiting for the files to finish extracting here. It'll take a couple more seconds. Alright, once they are extracted, I need to use the full installer first. So the one that just simply says WDX ENU, this is the first one that I need. And you'll see inside of here I have WD Express _full, which is actually the same file that you could have downloaded rather than downloading the ISO image. But what it's done is it's also downloaded the entire packages. So that way it has all of the files that it needs here locally on the computer, and I don't have to wait for it to go out and download all these files. Now what this also does is allows me to download it at the school with a faster internet connection, then take the files home on my flash drive. Alright, so when I do the installation, I want to agree to the license terms. But I don't necessarily want to be part of the improvement program. It's up to you if you want to be or not. I'm going to click Install. It'll prompt me for the UAC. Am I sure I want to allow this to make changes? Yes. And then what it will do is it will actually, it says acquiring, which it thinks it's actually downloading these from the internet, but in reality it's downloading them from that packages folder that's back there. So this will take several minutes to actually do the installation. Let it go through the install, and then once this is done, I will show you the next steps. So the installation completed. As you can tell by the time, it took quite a while for it to finish, and it now requires a restart, so I'm going to go ahead and restart the computer. Alright, so after we restart, you'll notice that Visual Studio will actually start during the installation. It actually has some more things that it has to install. So it's going to install some of the runtimes that it needs. It will install some of the other modules that it needs and prerequisite files. Now this is a fresh install of Windows 7, so a lot of the stuff may already be installed on your computer. This does not have any of the updates installed for Windows, so this one will take considerably longer than most other desktops will. Alright, so after another 12 minutes, it actually did finish the installation of the Windows desktop. Now the thing is, before I actually before I run it the first time, I need to close out of this, and I'm going to go to the folder that says VS2012.4, and I need to install this package. So before I run Visual Studio, I need to make sure I have all of the updates installed. Otherwise, what will happen is the first time that I run it, it will create a whole bunch of folders. I'll have to wait a while for it to do that stuff, only to find out that it's going to force me to install the update anyhow. So I'm going to agree to the license, go ahead and install it. And once again, it'll prompt for the UAC, and it will take a while to do this installation also. So expect it to take a while to do the installation. Go get a cup of coffee or something, but it will take a little bit of time for it to perform the install. Alright, so that was almost 9 minutes, and the installation did succeed. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it now. Now, after you launch it the first time, it may tell you that there are updates available, and if it does, then I would suggest doing is opening Windows Update and keep rerunning Windows Update until you run out of updates to actually get installed. Now, it will require a product key, and for you to get the product key for it, you do need to register for it. So you go online, get a product key, type it in here. It is free, but it will email the product key to you for you to perform the installation. After you successfully type in the product key and apply it, it will tell you that it was applied successfully. Make sure it does this, or else it will not allow you to launch the program. The first time you run it, it will take a while for it to actually set up some folders that are going to be used for performing your tasks and to create programs. So expect this to take a couple of minutes for it to perform this section also. Now that it's installed, it did pop up and tell me that updates are available, and like I said, what I would want to do is go to Windows Updates and just keep running the updates for it, or click on that little balloon tip that pops up down there. Once you actually get it installed and have all the updates installed, then you're ready to start using it. So to start using it, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to Start New Project. And when I start a new project, you'll notice that it defaults to Visual Basic. And this is one thing that a lot of people do by accident, is they use Visual Basic. It looks almost the same when you first start building your applications, but then when you start typing your code, it will not work right. So make sure that you select Visual C#. C# is the pound sign, by the way. Alright, so we are going to create a Windows application, and so if I do Visual C# Windows, you will see that I have some choices here. And what we're going to actually create is a Windows Forms application. Now this is something going to be with a GUI interface. The console applications are things that would show up in what looks like the command prompt. So I want to create a Windows Forms application, and my first application here is just simply going to be Hello World. So I'm going to give it a name, and you'll notice by default the location where these get stored is going to be under the users, your user account, documents, Visual Studio 2012, and then projects. This is where they get saved by default. If you're using your computer, great. If you're using somebody else's, you may want to change this to your flash drive by clicking Browse and going to your flash drive instead, or wherever you want to store it. Alright, so I want to make sure that I rename it immediately, because if I don't name it here, then I have to go through a few other steps to rename it later. So I'm going to call this Hello World, with no spaces, and I want this checkbox here to be checked, the one that says Create Directory for Solution. And when I click OK, what it's going to do behind the scenes is it's actually creating a folder for me. So if I go to Documents, Visual Studio, Projects, I now have a folder here called Hello World. And this entire thing is called a solution. And a solution consists of all of the files, all of the resources, all of the pictures, everything that's required to make my program work, all gets contained within this project folder, and like I said, that's called a solution. So our first file here is this Hello World, and this is the actual solution file. If I double click on this, it would actually open the solution up in Visual Studio. But if I go into the folder, I will see that I have some files like form1.cs and form1designer.cs. And what you'll notice here is form1.cs and form1 over here, that is the very first thing that gets created, is form1. So every time I make a forms application, I will always end up with a form1. This is what I want to manipulate, but before I do, I need to turn some things on. Alright, so the first thing is over here on the side we have this thing called the toolbox, and I want to make this visible all the time, so I'm going to click this little push pin here that says Auto Hide, and what that will do is make it where the toolbox shows up all the time. The next thing that I want to turn on is at the bottom here, there is a way to turn on an error list to show any errors that you get, and that's up here under the View menu, and then Error List. And then what that'll do is every time I get an error, the error message will show up down here. It gives me an idea on what's going wrong with the program. Alright, so then the next thing I want to do is I want to come up here to the Tools menu, go to Options, and I want to turn on line numbers. And what I'm doing here is when I actually type in the code, it'll tell me that I have an error on line 23, but I can't necessarily see what line 23 is. But if I come down here and I expand Text Editor, and then go to all languages, then if I go to all languages here and if I turn on line numbers, then what it will do for me is it'll make it where when I start typing code that I will see all of the line numbers, and I can actually go back, and if this tells me there's an error on line 23, I can find line 23. Alright, so I want to see the code for this form. So the way that I do that is I'm going to right click on form1.cs and view code. And so this is what we actually get, is a text editor, and notice we do have line numbers here, which means if it says that there's an error on line 8, I can go, oh hey, here's line 8, there's my problem. And it kind of makes it easier to try to figure out what exactly is wrong with my program. Some things that I need to know are names of these areas here. So this thing here is called our work area. This is where we're actually going to perform our work. Now you'll notice that we have this thing which looks like a form, and there's nothing on it right now, but we'll add things to it. And then we have our code here, but all of these will show up on tabs as we open more and more program files. Then depending on what I'm working on, I have this thing called the toolbox over here, and the toolbox has things in it that are called controls. And what controls are things like our checkboxes, our labels, we have buttons, we have text boxes, and so forth. And these are things that we can put onto our form. Over here we have the thing called the Solution Explorer, and what this is, it shows a list to us of all of the resources that are in our project. And you'll notice Solution Hello World contains a folder called Hello World that has these things in it. Down here, this is the error list, like I said before, and then this thing over here is our Properties window. Now the Properties window actually has a couple of things that you can change to. So I have Properties, and I have Events that I can look at. So the events are going to be under the lightning bolt. Those would be things like if I click on something, if I hover over something. And the properties is going to be, what do I want these things called? How do I want them to look? How can I change the default look of these objects? Alright, so over here under Controls, on the toolbox, there will be times when you won't be able to find something that you need. And what it does is, by default it says Common Controls, but if I go to All Windows Forms, it'll show to me all of the controls that are available in here. So if I'm missing something, then I just simply go to All Windows Forms. Alright, the Properties window over here, for each object that you select, you get these handles around it so you can see what item is selected. It will also show you right here what object is selected on the screen. Now, our form here, it's called Form 1, and this is considered to be bad programming design because I didn't rename it. So what I want to do is I want to give this thing a better text up here. And so what I'm going to do is under the Properties, I have this thing that says Text. And what I want to do is change this to Hello World. And when I press Enter, you'll see that the title up here is now changed. Now, I have this categorized view, and then I also have my alphabetical view. So I'm going to do alphabetical. And then what you'll see is that all of these properties are now in order alphabetically. And one of the top ones here is name. Every object that we create has a name, and some of the objects that we create will also have a value. So what does the user see? Behind the scenes, we always want these to be renamed to something. Now in Blackboard, there is a list of common controls and the prefixes for them. And this is a form, so it's going to be prefixed with FRM. And if you look in that list in Blackboard, you'll see that. And instead of being form 1, this is our main form, so I'm going to call it FRM main. And what that does is that actually makes this particular form called FRM main. I can reference it by this. Remember, every object that we have, we can identify and we can manipulate. All right, my actual form I also want to rename, so I'm going to right-click on it and rename it. All right, so once again, it's FRM main. And now that just renamed FRM main, and notice these form 1s also changed here. Behind the scenes, when I rename things this way, it will automatically change all of the references to this object in all the different sections of code where that object is referenced. So what you'll see here is I have FRM main, and it is a system.windows.forms.form. And we'll get into what exactly this means, but this is the hierarchy of all of our objects. So system is going to be our superclass, and then our superclass has a child or derived class called Windows. Windows has a derived class called Forms, and Forms has a derived object called Form, which is this thing. And so what we're doing is we're just simply declaring our parent-child relationship between all of the objects. All right, now like I said, the Solution Explorer up here just has all of the resources in it that are included in our program, and you can go through every one of these and just simply expand them. You can see what's in there. Or every one of these things that are in here is nothing more than a resource file, like a binary object, it could be a picture, or it could be a text file. And actually most of these are text files. I could actually right-click on this, open it up with Notepad, and there's the exact code for this particular program that we're trying to work on. Now that we have everything renamed the way that it needs to be, I've gone through and renamed form 1 to form main.cs. I have renamed my form, actually gave it a name of FRM main. The next thing that I need to do before I do anything else is I need to save it. What I need for you to do is get in the habit of going to File, and then you'll notice that you have Save, and then you also have Save All. And Save All has a keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-S. If you only do save, it will only save form main.cs, but it doesn't save any of the designer files. It won't save any of the other project files that are related to this. So you want to make sure that you always do Save All. Now it is also located up here on the menu. You'll notice that you have Open, Save, and then Save All listed right here. So either get in the habit of using the keyboard shortcut, the shortcut up here on the menu, or going to File and Save All. But please make sure you know that you have to do File, Save All. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to add an element to the screen. There are a couple of ways I can do it. The first way is I can take a button, I can drag it over, and I can drag it around and put it wherever I want it. Or the other option is I can simply double click on it. Now if I double click on it, it will always snap to the top left of whatever the selected container object is, which in this case is going to be our form. Alright, so this is just simply going to be a button. And what I want to do is I want to make a little program that just simply says hello world when you click on it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize my form so I only have just a little bit of a window. And I want to turn off some things up here. So I don't want to have a minimize button and I don't want a maximize button. Then over here what you'll notice is that I actually have the ability to maximize it, and I also have the ability to minimize it. So what I want to do is I want to turn off the minimize box, and I want to turn off the maximize box and also the minimize box. So what that does for me is now those buttons are gone. The person cannot click the maximize or minimize button. It just simply is going to be this window shows up. Alright, so now button 1, if you go back and look at Blackboard, button 1 is a button. More specifically, it's what's called a command button. So a command button is going to have a prefix of CMD. So I need to rename this thing, And what I want to do is I'm going to call it CMD, and then typically I'm going to call it whatever it does. So maybe in this case I'm going to say CMD display hello world. And I want to be descriptive in the names, but not necessarily so long that I have to worry about what I named it. But what you'll notice here is I now have the ability to see all of the objects that I've added to my form. So I have the form itself, and I also have the CMD display hello world button. All right, so what I want to do is I want to give this some code to actually do something. All right, so I'm going to play with this just a little bit more before we add that code. I want to play with the color of it. So what I can do is I can play with what's called the back color here, and I have the ability to change it to blue or whatever else. But you also have up here custom, and I could select any color that I want. You have the ability to add a background image to it. You can have a background image layout, which is going to be if it's tiled or if it's stretched. I have the ability to change the appearance of it. So if I don't want it to necessarily look like a flat button, if I want it to be a 3D looking button, I can do that kind of stuff. I have the foreground color, which would be my text color. I can align it. I have the ability to provide its location, and in this case it's by pixels. And if you notice, if I click on this little handle over here to expand it, you have an X and Y coordinate. Now this is going to be from the top left, so the top left of my form to the top left of this particular element. Is it locked? That would mean that something else is not allowed to manipulate it. We can have a margin around it, modifiers, padding. We can specify its size here, so I can actually make it bigger or smaller. And you'll notice if I drag the box or the button to make it bigger, if I come down here and look at size, the size actually changed. So if I make this a little bit bigger here, then now the size has changed, or I can manually type that in. We also have what's called a tab stop and a tab index, and what that's going to be is when you start making programs that have more than one text box, we typically expect to be able to click the tab key on your keyboard and go from one element to the next. Well, what happens is they get a tab index, and the tab index is going to be the order in which it goes through them. And it always starts at 0 and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And what I need to make sure is that I always put my elements in the correct order, that if somebody were to press the tab key on the keyboard, that it would go from one particular element to the next in the correct order. I can also specify if it's a tab stop. So if I don't want somebody to be allowed to use the tab key, then I could state that it's false here. All right, the text. This is going to be what the button actually says. So I'm going to say hello. That's what I want it to show. And you'll notice right now it says button 1, but when I come over here and I press enter, now it says say hello. All right, I have the ability to change the alignment of the text. And the way that it's shown here, this is middle, but I can make it top left, bottom right. I can align it to the left and so forth. Typically with buttons, we're going to leave them centered. And then we also have the ability to make it visible or not visible. So if I want to make it where somebody can't see the button, then I make it false. Now you'll notice the button still shows up here because I'm in design view. But if I were to try to run this, I'm going to click start. Behind the scenes it's compiling it. And in just a second I will actually get the program running and I will get to see what it looks like. But here's my program, and you'll notice that there is no button here because I set its visibility to false. Alright, so I want to make this true. Alright, so now I have my form that has a different title. The form itself has a different name. I've named it appropriately, form main. It's called form main up here. My button is a command button. I have renamed it to CMD and then whatever it does. And then I have changed the text on it. So to actually provide the code to do it, what I need to do is create what's called a click event for this button. Alright, so I'm going to save this all so you can see what it looks like. And I want to look at the code for this. The code for it doesn't have anything to do with the button in it. Now you notice it has this thing called namespace, which is hello world, which is just simply what's going to call the area in memory to hold all of the resources for this program, but it has nothing to do with the button. To actually get a click event for the button, I need to double click on it. And when I double click on it, you'll notice that I now have a method which is a private void, which means nobody else can call it except for the form main. It's void, which means it's not going to return any data. The name of the event method is command display hello world underscore click, and it receives an object and it receives an argument. Now we'll get more into what those mean later, but what you need to know is that I just created the default click event for this thing, which means that if somebody were to click on it, this is the code that would actually get executed. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make a message box pop up on the screen, and I want it to say hello world. So I know it's called a message box. I'm going to start typing message, and you'll notice I have IntelliSense. Alright, now IntelliSense will show to me all the things that it thinks that I'm trying to type. And if I do message box has a method. And we have equals, reference equals, and show. Well, I want to show it. Okay, so if I do show and then open parentheses, it will show to me what it would look like. And notice here inside the parentheses should be a string value of text. Alright, so what am I going to display? Well, it's going to be string, so therefore it needs to be in quotes. And I'm going to say hello world. This is our first program. Close the parentheses, and every statement that we write, we have to end the line with a semicolon. Alright, so this is our basic program. So now if I run this, which is called debugging it, I get no errors down here. The program will compile in just a second, and I actually get my little window. Alright, so now if I click on this, I get a message box pops up and says hello world. Alright, so some things that I can do a little bit differently is when I do the message box.show, you'll notice that it says 1 of 21. We have what are called overloaded methods that are available to us. Alright, so we can do things like change who the window owner is. We can change the string text. But what it's showing us is all of the stuff that we can send to it. And this one here says string text and string caption. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass two values to it. I'm going to say hello world, comma, and then I'm going to say something like hello. Okay, so now what it's doing is it's passing this value through, and this will get displayed in the actual message, and then hello is the caption. So what will happen is that will actually show up at the top of the window for me. And so now I see hello is here and hello world is here, and then I can click OK. So we've talked about overloaded methods, and an overloaded method is just simply that I'm allowed to send different types or different order of arguments, and based on how I send those, then the system will interpret those differently and give me a different outcome. In this case, if I only provide the first value, it makes it the text that's inside the message box. If I provide two, then this becomes the caption. Alright, so I want you to go ahead and save this. Remember, it's going to be save all. One more thing that we're going to do is we always want to build an installer package. And we actually have the ability to do this pardon me, right from the IDE. We actually can build a package that will allow us to share it with somebody else, and then they can install it. So if I come up here to build, I have the ability to publish hello world. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and publish it. I'm going to leave all the defaults alone. If I click next, it's going to ask what I'm going to install from, if it's a website, a UNC, if it's going to be on a network, or from a CD or DVD-ROM. Now if I were to install this from a website, what it would do is it would allow me to publish the package, and anytime that I put updates out on the internet, it'll automatically check for updates. Alright, so I'm just going to leave it alone. In this case, where would it check for updates? You could actually put the full URL to the website. In this case, this one's not going to check for updates. And then finish. So I just left all the defaults. Now what it actually just did behind the scenes is inside of my folder here, you'll see I'm still in hello world, and then it finally finished packaging here for me. So if I go into hello world, I have a new folder called publish, and then I have an actual setup. So if I run setup, it would install it just like any other installer package, which means that my program would show up in add remove programs or programs and features, and I actually could uninstall the program just like any other Windows application. Alright, so anytime you make any of these applications, I want you to go ahead and debug it. So that means we click the start button, make sure that it runs, and then on top of that I want you to publish it. So that's up here under the build menu, and then publish. Alright, so what did it do when we debugged it? Well, what it actually did is it created a bin folder, which bin means binaries, And if I open this, you will see that I have a debug folder, and inside of here I actually have an application called Hello World that I can run directly. So it actually built a full executable when I tested my program. And what I should be able to do is when you submit anything, I should be able to see your debug file here. I should be able to access your code, and I should be able to see that you've published it. Alright, so one more thing that I need to do with any of my programs is I need to include some comments. Alright, there are two ways that I can include comments. There is a single line comment, which is called an inline comment. And the way that I do this is typically going to be after my line of code, I'm going to type 2 forward slashes, and you'll notice that it turns green. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in what does this section of code do. So display message box and say hello world. Okay, so this is the comment explaining what this is doing. Now the other thing that I need to do is I'm going to create what's called a block comment. Now a block comment would be like you've been doing in Raptor, where you do forward slash and then an asterisk, and this is my, and I'm going to press enter here just so you can see it, block comment. It can be as many lines as I want. And then to end it, I'm going to do an asterisk and then another forward slash. So this whole thing here is one block comment, and what I would like you to do with the block comments is at the very top of your program, before it even says using system here, press enter a couple times, and I want you to include a block comment with your name, class number, the date, and a description of the program, just like you've been doing for all of your Raptor programs. Alright, so go ahead and include your block comment up here with your name and information, and then I want you to display inline comments with each line of code explaining what the line of code is doing. Alright, so go ahead and save all, and then we're done with this program. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Close Solution. Alright, so now what I can do is I can build another program that is going to do something else. We're going to make a brand new project. Alright, so I'm going to make a new project. So I'm going to come up here to File, New Project. I'm still making a Windows C# Windows Forms application. And in this case, what I want to do is this program is going to be calculate ticket price. And so let's just call it ticket pricing. Now it will automatically create the folder for ticket pricing for me under my documents. It populates all the information, and notice once again we have a form1.cs, so immediately I want to rename this FRM main. Yes, I want to rename everything else related to it. And then I also want to rename the form itself to FRM main. Now it's already done that for me, so good, we're all set. And then I need to change the title at the top. So this one's going to be ticket pricing. Alright, so that's the very first thing I do, is I rename the form, I rename, I provide new text for the title, and then I do save all. And make sure you get in the habit of doing that. Always do save all. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want to ask somebody how many tickets they want. And so what we're going to do is we are going to ask them for a number of tickets, then we're going to provide a button for them to click on that says calculate total, and then we're going to provide an output for them. Alright, so to do this I'm going to use a text box. I'm going to put a text box up here. And what is this text box? Okay, well I don't know what it is yet, so I'm going to give it a name. It's just called text box 1. Well, I'm actually going to call this TBX, and this is going to be the number of tickets, so num tickets. Okay, and then what I need is a label to provide some information to the user to tell them what they're doing. Okay, now you'll notice the label, when I first dragged it, I got those little blue lines. I got to let go of it, and then when I let go of it and drag it again, now I will get the blue lines and also this pink one. And the pink one is the one that I want, because what that is that's stating that the text that is contained in label 1 will line up with the text in the box over here. So it looks more professional. That's what we need to do. Alright, so label 1, I want to rename this. Now this one is going to be just simply a label asking the user for information. I'm not programmatically going to change it. So I could leave it alone, or I could rename it. Just for sake of showing you how to do it, I'm going to rename this, and the label is an LBL, and then num tickets. So this is the label stating that we're asking for the number of tickets. Okay, and then if I come down here, I want to change the text for the label and want to say something like how many tickets. Okay, so now the user can look at this and say, okay, how many tickets? Okay, let's type in the number of tickets over here. All right, so if I'm going to calculate this, then I need a button that I can put on here that will allow me to calculate the total. All right, so if the purpose of this button is to calculate the total, then I'm going to call it CMD calculate, and maybe calculate total. And then if I come down here, I want to give it some text, and instead of being button 1, I want it to say calculate. Okay, so now calculate is the only thing that shows up because it's not wide enough, so I can make it a little wider and I can get some more room on it. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make it where the user types in so many tickets here. I click calculate total. Each ticket costs $75. Maybe it's for a play or for a musical or a concert or something like that, but each ticket is $75. So I want to calculate however many tickets they have times $75 and display it down here in a text, not in a text box, but in another label. So I'm going to put a label down here, and my label here is going to be label 1, but I don't want it to say anything. Not until we actually give it some text. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I blank this, and if you notice, it actually just disappeared. Okay, if I click off of it, I cannot get it back. Alright, so if I lose it, it shows up over here though as label 1. Alright, so now label 1 is still here, and now I can change it. So this one is going to be LBL output. This is the actual output from our program. Alright, so now you notice that when I double clicked on it, I accidentally created a form main underscore load. And this is actually considered to be bad form because I don't really want it to do anything here, so I shouldn't leave this blank section. Alright, if I delete that text, I will break my program. To actually fix that, what I need to do is click on the form and then come over here and click on the little lightning bolt, the events. And you'll notice that I have load here actually is supposed to do form main underscore load. If I delete this and press enter, what it will actually do is delete the code for it over here. So don't ever delete the code directly. You always have to delete it from the events for that particular element. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to make it where if you type in that I have 3 tickets, calculate total will be 3 times 75, and then we put the value into here. Alright, so it's going to be, the event is going to be that click on calculate total, so I'm going to double click on it to provide the default click event for it. And what I need to do is I need to declare some values, and then I need to perform a calculation and display the information to the screen. Alright, so I'm going to declare my values, or my variables. Okay, some variables that I need is I need to know something like the number of tickets. Now that's going to be an integer data type, and the way that this works in C# is that we have to specify what the data type is when we declare something. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say int, and that specifies that I'm actually making a variable that is an integer data type. And then what do I want to call it? I'm going to call it, and I'm going to use the prefix for it. Once again, if you go back to Blackboard, you see the prefixes. For an integer data type, what I want to do is call my variable int num tickets. Okay, and so by default, the number of tickets that we have is going to equal to 0 because when we first start the program, we don't purchase any tickets. Alright, the next thing that I want to do is I want to declare a constant value. And in this case, I'm going to use the keyword const space. Now it knows that it's a constant. And this thing is going to be a decimal value. And what that means is that I'm going to take the price and I'm going to put it into something that has decimal places. And we typically will use decimal as the data type for money, and something else that we need decimal places for, we usually call it a double. But in this case, it's money, so I'm going to call it a decimal. And what am I going to call it? Now, it's a constant, so our naming scheme for a constant should be all caps, and instead of spaces, we put underscores. So it's going to be cost per ticket. Alright, so now in this case we need to have a data type prefix for this. So I could put in DEC cost per ticket, and now I know that that's a constant. It's up to you in this case when it's a constant if you want to provide the data type or just simply state what it is. All right, so in this case, it's going to be equal to 75, and then once again a semicolon at the end. And then the next thing that I need to do is I need something to keep track of the total cost. Now in this case, it's going to be a decimal value, because I'm going to take an integer value of 3 times $75. You know, maybe I make it $75.12. Then I need something that will keep track of a decimal value. All right, so decimal is the data type. The prefix for a decimal variable is going to be DEC, and then total cost. And by default, at the very beginning of our program, the value is 0 for that. Okay, so now the next thing that I need to do is I need to look at whatever the value is in the text box, and I want to multiply it by the cost per ticket. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here multiply the number of tickets times the cost per ticket. Okay, so now there's a catch to this. In our actual program, this box right here is called a text box. So it's a text box. So the question is, what is the data type that's in here? Well, the data type that's in this box, that's called a text box, is text. And on top of it, it actually has a value here called text. And if you look at this, text is, I could put in Bob or something like that, but whatever the value is that's in the box is actually its text property. All right, so what I want to do is I want to look at this text box dot text property to find out what the value is. But the problem is that the value is actually a text string. And so I need something to be able to read this in as a text string. So I'm going to show you the long way to do it, and then I'll show you the short way. So what I'm going to do, the long way, is I'm going to make a string value called str num tickets. And then what I need to do is I need to read the value in from that text box and then put it into that string value for str num tickets. All right, so the way that I'm going to read that in is I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say str num tickets is equal to whatever's in that text box. Well, what was the name of the text box? I don't remember. Well, that's where the prefixes come in. I know that my text boxes are all going to start with TBX. And then IntelliSense will show me all of the items that start with TBX. So now it's num tickets. I can press enter. And now I can't just simply state that str num tickets is equal to TBX num tickets, because I can't say that my string value is equal to a text box. But what I can say is that my string value is equal to the text value for my text box. So what I'm going to do is TBX num tickets dot, and then these are all of the properties that I can play with it. And if I come down, I will actually see that there is a text value. And so now what this will do is it'll take whatever value the person typed into the text box, stick it into str num tickets. Then the next thing that we need to do is we need to somehow convert that value from a text string to a number. And the way that we do this is I want to take str num tickets and I want to put it into int num tickets. So I'm going to say int num tickets is equal to, and then what I need to do is I actually need to convert str num tickets. So I'm going to use a method called convert dot and then to what method or what data type I want. Well, in this case, I want to convert it to an integer, so I'm going to come down here to int32. And then what do I want to convert? I want to convert str num tickets. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm telling it, read in whatever is in str num tickets, convert it to an integer, and then stick that into int num tickets. All right, so then the next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out what the total cost is. Now I know that the total cost is going to be the cost per ticket times the number of tickets. So what I can do is I can say DEC total cost is equal to the number of tickets, which is int num tickets, times, which is the asterisk, the cost per ticket. So cost per ticket. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to take whatever that total is and I want to put it into the text value for LBL total cost. All right, so I know that it was called LBL, and it was actually going to be output, is what we called it. And it's .text value I want to manipulate, and so what I'm going to do is put that equal to whatever DEC total cost is. And we'll save this. All right, so let's break this down real quick. What we did was we stated that our value here is a decimal value, cost per ticket, which is 75, and it's underlined, and I'll show you why in here in just a minute. The next thing is we declared a decimal value called des total cost, which we set that equal to 0 to begin with. And by the way, this is a decimal value, so I probably want to start it off at something like 0.00, just so we can have it look like money. And once again, we get the underline, which I'll show you here in a second how to fix it. And then we have a text string value called strnumTickets, which is just simply to hold the value in the text box for a moment, so that way we can convert it to an integer and stick it into int number of tickets. So what we do is whatever's in the tbx numTickets, its text value, we put into strnumTickets. Then we take strnumTickets, convert it to an integer, and stick it into int numTickets. And then however many tickets there are times the cost per ticket becomes the total cost. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take whatever the total cost is right now, and we're going to put it into lbl output.text. Now here's the catch, is my total cost right now is a number, and I can't just simply stick a number into a text field. I actually do have to convert it. And what happens is most of our variables have a .to method. And if you notice I do .to and it actually gives me the to string, then what I can do is I can actually take this thing and convert it to a string. The only catch is this is a method, so I actually have to include parentheses here to do this. Alright, so what I'm doing is the total cost dot and then converted to a string and then display that in the LBL output. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and run this and you'll see that I get an error. Okay, so it says there were build errors. Would you like to continue to run the last successful build? The answer is going to be no. And the reason for no is if I run it, it's not necessarily going to run right. Alright, so what happens is we have something here, to me looks like a decimal number. So what it tells you is error number 1, literal type double cannot be implicitly converted to type decimal. Use an M suffix to create a literal of this type. And then it tells me that it's on line 24. Okay, well here's line 24, so I know the error exists here. And what I need to do is somehow state to the system that this $75 is actually money. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a capital M after it. And what that does is it tells the system that, oh hey, this must be money. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing here with this 0.00 to tell it that this is money. Now you notice the little underline didn't go away yet. And that's actually okay because it'll probably go away when we start it. So let's go ahead and try to run it. And this time it ran. Alright, so I want to purchase one ticket. Alright, sorry, I put 3. One ticket, and I calculate the total is $75. Alright, so now we know the cost per ticket is 75, so 1 times 75 should be 75. And then the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to put here 3 tickets, just try it. And now there's the total. Now, what happens is if I do something like 2.5, this text box here, when I click calculate total, it's going to try to read that value in and convert it to an integer. And 2.5 does not look like an integer, so what I will actually do is end up crashing my program. Alright, so in this case, I want to go ahead and break the program because I want to stop it from running, and then I need to actually click the stop button up here. Alright, so I need to make sure that whatever they actually type in really is an integer value. And that's where our loops come in, which we'll start playing with loops later. We can validate the data to make sure that whatever they entered really does look like an integer, and if it's not, then we can either reprompt them for it or we can just simply not do anything. Alright, so I also have the ability here, this des_total_cost.toString has one more little feature that we can play with. And what I'm going to do is inside the parentheses I'm going to put a set of double quotes, a capital C, and close the double quotes. And what this is going to do is it tells it, hey, take whatever's in total cost, convert it to a string, and then display it as if it's currency. And so what will happen now is if I display this and I do 10 tickets, now I get something that looks like money because it puts a $ sign and it will guarantee that it has 2 decimal places. And if I buy 1,000 tickets, it will give me my thousands separator. And all I did was it just simply stated that it's supposed to be converted to a string and displayed as if it were currency. Now you'll notice that when my label actually displays, it displays way over here, so I want to move this over, if I can grab it. So I'm going to move it over here so that way when it actually displays, it'll be more centered. There are other ways to actually center them, programmatical ways to do it, but for right now I just want you to go ahead and just drag them so that they look like they're centered. And in this case, if I buy 30 tickets, so now it keeps moving that over. Alright, so this is what I want you to do. So I want you to design this program. You're going to publish it. So remember to publish it. We're going to go to Build, Publish it. We're going to select the defaults. So we're installing from a CD. We're not going to be doing updates. And then when we're done, we just click Finish. When it's all the way done, it will actually display the folder to me. So this is what you would actually share with somebody else if you put it on a CD. Alright, and I made sure that the program ran. I have a little bit of comments in here, but what you need to do is you need to explain what each one of these lines does. So what I want to see in your code is // and then an explanation. What did this line do? Same thing with this one, // what did this line do, and so forth. So you're going to do this with each of the items. You're going to specify what each line of code did, and at the very beginning include your block comment that has your name, class number, date, and description of the program. When you're done with everything, you're going to save all. And then now what I can do is I can come into here, into Documents, Visual Studio, and then I have my projects. Here are the projects that I've been working on. So what I want to do is I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to send to a compressed zip folder. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put your last name, and then this is week 11, and you're going to go ahead and save that. And then your Raptor program from the prior lesson, you're just simply going to copy into the zip folder. So what you're going to do, what you're going to submit, is a zip file that contains one Raptor program and two C# programs as your proof that you watched the videos.